Today, I want to talk about a topic closely related to tens of millions of Chinese college entrance exam takers, the exam-oriented education system. I'm 23 years old. I've already escaped from the bitter sea of exam-oriented education. But recently, when I look back on my 22 years of schooling, I just feel completely confused, and I have fallen into nihilism. I can't find the meaning of my first 22 years of life. All I can remember is studying for more than 10 hours a day, and during those long hours, my butt hardly ever left the chair. So now, whenever I sit for too long, my sciatic nerve starts to hurt. The 9 years from primary school to junior high were still fine. Our studies weren't that intense, and we even had time after class to play on the ground. But then, in the blink of an eye, we entered high school, where we had to face the college entrance exam 3 years later. There's a saying in China, the college entrance exam is like thousands of troops crossing a single log bridge. If your score is just 1 point lower, your ranking may drop by several thousand places. So from the very first day of high school, we had to wake up at 5:30 every morning and run morning exercises on the playground. And mind you, at that hour, whether in summer or winter, the sun hadn't risen yet. It was always pitch dark. After finishing the run, we rushed back to the classroom and immediately started memorizing from our humanities textbooks. Then around 6:30, we went to have breakfast, and we only have 10 minutes to eat. After finishing breakfast, it was almost 7 o'clock. At 7, the morning study session officially began and continued until noon at 12. Then we had lunch and took a short nap. By 2 p.m., everyone had to be back in the classroom to start the afternoon study session, which lasted until 6 p.m. At 7 p.m., the evening study session officially began, and it continued until 10 p.m. And we have to repeat that entire routine for 3 whole years. 3 whole fucking years. Hearing all this, you might think that with such an intense study schedule, everyone should be able to get into good universities, right? But it is not how it works. Just look at the admission rates of top universities in some Chinese provinces in 2025. In China, top universities refer to schools with the 985-211 designation, such as Tsinghua University, Peking University, or Shanghai Jiaotong University. All the other universities, whether first tier or second tier, are just considered ordinary undergraduate institutions. And I'm just an ordinary university student from an ordinary undergraduate school. There's a special team in China called Small Town Test Takers, referring to students from rural areas or small towns who managed to get into 985-211 universities. In my opinion, for those students, at least their 18 years of schooling brought them honor. But for those of us who only got into ordinary universities, what did we gain? Of course, everyone's intelligence, educational resources, or even level of effort are different. But that's not today's focus, so I won't comment on that. Alright, enough with the preface. Let's officially dive into today's topic. Why did I want to write about what exam-oriented education trained in me and what it took away from me? Because some time ago, I told ChatGPT I can't find meaning in the 22 years I spent in exam-oriented schooling, and it told me, try judging yourself less and use a more systemic perspective. First, I realized the exam-oriented education trained in me a kind of survival-style productivity under pressure. It means I can keep pushing through tasks even when I don't actually understand what I'm doing. And to be honest, during my 3 years in high school, I probably didn't truly understand 80% of what I studied. But because of pressure, time limits, social expectations, and teacher authority, I was pushed, sometimes forced, to pretend that I understood everything. For example, in classical Chinese poetry analysis, I usually didn't understand a single word, yet I could still follow the template. Literal translation plus imaginary plus techniques plus author's emotions. The second ability I developed was a high sensitivity to authoritative logic. Meaning we became really good at reading the room. We knew exactly what teachers wanted and what exam designers were testing. We learned so quickly, identify the evaluation system, and adjust ourselves to fit in. But this ability has limits. Not everyone can be like top students, whom somehow understand exactly what the second half of the hardest math problem is testing. The third thing we were trained in is high discipline but an extremely low pleasure threshold in studying. We could sit still for hours, studying non-stop, but the process almost never brought joy or excitement. Because studying wasn't a choice, it was forced. Sometimes it even felt like being forced upon by different kinds of knowledge, rather than choosing to absorb them. Lastly, I developed a strong sensitivity to not understanding. But this sensitivity isn't a good thing. It is an anxious kind where even a tiny bit of confusion makes me nervous. After leaving school, this feeling only intensified. Now it's time to analyze what it took from me. First, exam-oriented education took away our mental space to simply not know. In school, stopping to admit that you don't understand meant falling behind, losing face, and even feeling ashamed. Time pressure, other people's eyes, ranking stress, all these combined to make us stop asking questions early, afraid to show our ignorance. Second, it robbed us of the courage to slow down for true understanding. In a result-oriented system, taking time to think deeply and understand thoroughly was considered foolish and not allowed. Over time, your brain learns that understanding is luxury, not a necessity. Third, we were misled to believe that longer study hours and sitting for long periods meant more effort and value. In reality, true understanding and absorption often happen in places you can't see. Also, solving any academic problem requires switching between focused mode and diffuse mode. Otherwise, breakthroughs never happen. Fourth, exam-oriented education undermined our trust in long-term cognitive growth. During college finals, you realize that all your long-term accumulation wasn't trusted. You had to cram intensely in a very short time to get things done. Finally, I want to add that it also took away my ability to explore actively and my intrinsic curiosity. Because we were taught from an early age to follow the questions and use templates, we rarely had the chance to ask why, or what if I try a different approach? This lack of active exploration affects not only learning but also our courage and creativity when facing life and making choices. So, looking back at my student life, it trained me in many ways: survival-style productivity, sensitivity to authoritative logic, extreme discipline, and heightened awareness of what I didn't understand. But at the same time, it took away a lot. Mental space to admit not knowing, the courage to slow down for understanding, a correct sense of effort versus learning, trust in long-term growth, and even the drive for active exploration and intrinsic curiosity. So if you're still caught in the whirlwind of exam-oriented education, I want to say, effort is important, yes. But understanding your own learning pace and pay attention to your mental state is just as important. And don't equate long hours with real growth, and don't be afraid to stop and ask why. Try to give yourself some space, let your curiosity and active exploration slowly return. They are the real power behind lifelong learning and true growth. I'm still on this journey too, slowly understanding and reclaiming what was taken away. If you are willing, I hope this sharing helps you realize you are not alone. We're all trying to reclaim our learning rhythm and curiosity. Alright, that's my reflection on what student life trained in me and what it took away. See you in next video. Bye bye!